So, don't you guys really hate it when someone names a video something really exciting like Smartphone Showdown LG Super Fight Hardcore Battle Versus? Ha! Hey everybody, some Gadget Guy here, and we're going to take a quick look at these three different LGs, just showing some of the design evolution of what LG has been doing, because I'm actually really positive, especially now moving into the LG Flex. I've had the LG Flex for a couple days, and I'm really stoked with it. The LG Optimus G Pro was actually one of the first LG phones I ever had the pleasure of playing with, and I liked it a lot. I thought it was a little Samsung-y in many respects, but I thought it was an excellent first step, and especially from a company that was trying to move their products forward, was trying to make their products seem a little bit more exciting, and there's nothing more audacious than a phablet. It also came at that weird time where a lot of phones were starting to transition over to the Qualcomm 800, and this was one of the last of the Qualcomm 600 premier devices. I still think it's a pretty decent buy on AT&T because you can usually find them pretty cheap, and if you're not a hardcore power user, it still offers a tremendous amount of value considering how inexpensive it's become. And now, lately, I've been using the G2 as my daily driver. I still don't necessarily love LG's software experience, especially once you start getting into menus and stuff, and we can get into that a little bit later too. But I've found that the battery performance is phenomenal, and especially as I've been reviewing things like smartwatches, it's nice having a little Android handset on board that can run for a long period of time. But of course, now this culminates with the LG G Flex. And I know a lot of reviewers have been going out there saying like, well, it's an interesting device and this and that, but you'll probably still want to stick with the G2. And I think that actually showcases a disturbing lack of imagination, because everything about LG's software experience has been improved in the G Flex. Now, guys, you know me, I'm not a huge fan of the big phablet experience. And it's actually somewhat funny to now look back on the OG Pro because it's actually not as big anymore compared to other phablet-y devices. You know, this is a 5.2-inch display. This is a 5.5-inch display. It's really not that much bigger than many of our premier smartphones, especially when compared to some of my other favorite phones, like, you know, this Lumia 1520 just absolutely dwarfs, this humongous phablet that used to be so big. And you can kind of look at it in comparison to the LG G Flex. 6-inch screens now are becoming the new big audacious size. While I have a hard time using humongous screen phones as one-handed devices when I'm out and about, because I've got tiny girly little hands, and you can see like when I try and do G Flex, I've got to instantly go to two hands. But what is so exciting is seeing LG finally clean up some of these elements that have just been bugging the crap out of me with their phones. So we get into their menus and it's this white background, black text. It just doesn't really fit in with the rest of the design language. And to me, it feels a little gingerbready the way all of this stuff is laid out. And I don't feel that it's necessarily organized in the most efficient way possible, but a lot of people will fight me on that. Some people really love the way that these menus are laid out. Same thing with the G2. We get into these menus, this white background. I don't think that's necessarily a very attractive setup. But we get into the G Flex and we finally have a more Android Hollow-like experience. We have these black backgrounds, the colors pop off, the icons are easier to read, they're easier to see in direct sunlight because of the high contrast between the black background, the white text, and the icon that we're looking for. I find that this is a little easier for me to navigate solely based on the color choices of the menus. And it's hard to demonstrate on camera, but there's something really pretty now about how the curved screen actually plays into the scrolling effect on our lists and menus, like it is being sort of fed through some kind of concave piece of glass. I mean, it's just a really pleasant and really pretty effect. Now, as we're talking about LG as an ecosystem, one thing I really wish they'd fix up is their brightness setting, especially when it's set to auto, because it doesn't really do automatic brightness. I would prefer in auto, if I take my phone out in the dark, it's gonna scale it all the way back. If I take it out into sunlight, it's gonna scale it all the way up. On an LG, you still need to give it sort of a baseline brightness setting, and then it only will deviate, I don't know exactly what the settings are, but I wanna say something like 10%, just a subtle bump low or a subtle bump high. LG, I'm still having to control the brightness. That is not automatic brightness. I'm still not sold on the back button arrangement that LG devices are currently employing. I still prefer having a thumb button right here because that's naturally where my hand is gonna lie. And then I love having the volume rocker right here on my finger because it causes me to squeeze into the device to control it. That actually gives me more grip and more control over what's happening with a somewhat large piece of glass that I'm going to live my life out of. I don't like the experience of moving to this back button placement. I've gotten used to it, but I don't necessarily like it, where I have to push against the phone to turn it on or to move the volume up and down. And yeah, I can do double tap stuff to turn the screen on. Let's see. But I run into that problem fairly consistently, where the turning screen on doesn't work consistently. So out of 2 attempts, I'm rocking a 50% success rate in turning my screen on by tapping it. I'm just naturally going to look for hardware to turn my phone on and off. Now, what I have to say, though, is, again, we're watching LG evolve. And so whereas these buttons on the G2 are featureless and smooth, and I end up running my finger over the camera lens just as often as I run it over the volume up button, and the only button which really has any kind of distinctive feel is the power button, LG has done this wonderful thing in giving these volume keys just a little tiny nubbin, right there, so that as you run your finger across the back of the device, you have some kind of tactile sensation knowing where these buttons are. And I'm already, even just having used this phone for a couple days, I'm already less likely to hit this camera lens up here, smudging my camera, trying to find my volume rocker and my power button. I like this experience. I like these little ergonomic touches which give us better access to the controls on our devices. And even something as simple as the lock screen responding to gestures. So if I tip it up, it's going to scroll up and we're going to see a nighttime sky. And if I tip it down, it's going to roll down and then we're going to see this ocean scene. It's those little touches that really do sort of give this thing a personality or a life of its own. It becomes less a collection of glass and circuitry and something just ever so slightly a bit more organic, a living, breathing part of our life that can really help improve how we go about managing data while we're on the go. And for as skeptical as I was of this curved screen, the second you fire up a movie on Netflix or a video of any kind, this wraparound sort of display experience really does come into its own. I know that people are complaining about the 720p screen, but when viewed at arm's length, it's really hard. Even with the G2 and the OG Pro having 1080p displays, I have a hard time seeing when my phone is this far away from me. I have a hard time seeing a substantial advantage between these two devices. When I have them side by side and I pull up the same app, you're absolutely right. I can see just a slight graininess to the image on the G Flex. But in day-to-day usage, when I'm out and about, when the sunlight is hitting my device, or when I'm in a dark room, or when I'm just trying to manipulate data on the go, it hasn't really been that precious a situation. It hasn't really been that noticeable when I'm actually hand-holding this thing and I'm going about my day. What I really have to commend LG for is taking the notion of durability to another level. Our devices become mainline primary communications gear for everything that we do, be it work or play. And so all of us have been through that experience where our phone takes a tumble and there's that heart-wrenching feeling as we go to pick it up just to make sure that it's okay. And LG is starting a conversation and saying, well, you know what? We're going to make a phone that should last a 2-year contract. If you've ever, had your phone crushed and you just sit there and you can push into the flexiness of the screen and you don't have to worry about this thing shattering. It's got so much more play. It's so much more durable. You're not afraid to take it out, or you're not afraid to throw it in a back pocket. You accidentally sit on it. You're gonna be okay. It's not as sexy as putting in more megapixels or more gigaflips or anything like that. It's harder to make that an exciting part of the discussion, but it's also where we've been talking about like waterproof phones. Having a slightly more flexible device, a slightly more rugged device really does appeal to me, especially as we still have this fascination with making the backs of our phones sort of glossy, and I think our fingerprint smudgy magnets, but knowing that the back panel on this G Flex is going to heal itself if you scratch it up a little. And I'm doing a time-lapse video on that later. I will put up my own time-lapse. I know a bunch of people have already done it, but I just think it's fun, so I'm gonna do one too. But just knowing that you can get in and if you have your phone in your pocket with keys and it gets kind of scratched up a little, it'll eventually smooth itself back out. That's cool. That actually does benefit me, and that does actually improve the smartphone experience. I feel a little less concerned, especially where after a year, our phones look a little scratched up, a little banged up. They don't feel as nice anymore. It becomes part of that driving discussion for, well, maybe I should buy a new one. I want my phone to be pretty again. And now you don't necessarily have to run to that conclusion with a phone that can self-heal a little bit. And this offers a really cute little glimpse into what a future G series phone might look like, because I would love to have this kind of curve bend flexibility and durability in a slightly more phone-sized shell, especially now that I've had some time to play with the G Flex. So folks, if there's anything you've been wanting to know about LG's current crop of smartphones, definitely drop some comments, drop me some questions. I love getting into it with you guys. As always, thanks so much for watching. Be on the lookout for my future G Flex videos as we go through a few more tests. I really want to share all that with you guys, especially as the G Flex is going to be heading to Canada soon. So all you neighbors to the north of us, be on the lookout because I'm going to have some fun stuff coming up soon. And as always, folks, thanks so much for watching, for sharing my videos, subscribing, getting into debates with me, dropping comments. I will catch you all on the next video.